off today. And joining me on this Kings Road walk to Winterfell is our Grand Baster, Josh Harris. Josh, how are we doing today, bud?
It's good. It's actually 50 degrees out today. So what's that, like 19 Celsius? It hasn't snowed in a week. The sun is out. I've been caching. It's been a great week.
See, the weather turns and everything starts getting better, right? That's all we needed. That's all we need. A little bit of sunshine, a little less snow. Things start going our way. Let's hope we can keep that train rolling here tonight. Last night was just one of those nights where you had a certain line or a certain combination or you didn't. Last night, Winnipeg went off. Winnipeg won, particularly empty net goals. I saw a post last night from somebody on hockey Twitter that Blake Wheeler has the most empty net points in the last 3 seasons. And Mark Scheifele is second. And I think it was Nick Ehlers is third. And they're all 20 points or above over the last 3 years. Those guys are always on the ice when they had the lead, and it paid off for a lot of people last night.
I was telling Jake that, like I said no one runs better on the empty net than Winnipeg won. I have no stats to back that up. You gave me the stats, but it seems like every time they're chalky and on the ice with an empty net situation, they score.
It's just a lock. Like here we are, like every night, like just begging that Bergeron can bank it in off a defenseman, that's guarding the net or something like that. And Blake Wheeler just seems to find assists and goals with the empty net like almost every single night. It is. I would like to say it's a skill, but it's also just his team getting some goals and him having the trust of his coach. So, if you had
that,
that too. Yeah. If you had Winnipeg, you might have had a good night. Depends who you had with them. Andrei Vasilevsky had a big night. He was the hammer goaltender, if I'm not mistaken, aside from Tristan Jarry had the 35 save bonus plus the win as well. But Vasilevsky, 28 saves plus a shutout. Like we said, Winnipeg went off. Joel Farabee had a big night. A couple Pittsburgh guys did well. Kasperi Kapanen with a couple goals. So it was one of those nights where if you looked at the top of the leaderboard for most tournaments, you saw lineups with 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 Winnipeg Jets. And then it was just, pretty much one off or 2 mans besides that. And that's the thing, right? Like we were talking in Slack this morning that the correlated lines don't always get there. Sometimes, last night, I think the 10K winner, it looked like a cash lineup. That just happens. I wouldn't recommend just running cash lineups in your GPPs all the time, but if you're a cash game player, I would recommend putting your cash game lineup in a GPP once in a while because it could pay off like it did last night, likely for someone else. All right. That's about it for last night. Probably there's not too much else to talk about other than Winnipeg smashed and did the job with the empty net. So just want to remind everybody that if you're not able to watch your favorite Awesemo shows here on YouTube, that you can catch these Awesemo shows, almost all of them anyways, on the Awesemo Podcast Network. We've got a podcast for every sport, and we're available on every major platform. So head on over to awesemo.com/podcast to check out the latest. Just leave us a 5-star review on any one of our podcasts with your Twitter handle or email address, and you'll be eligible to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. One winner will be awarded every Friday, and reviews will be eligible to win for up to 1 year. So even if you leave one now, you could win in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. Could be a nice Christmas present. So if you want to catch our podcast, head on over to awesemo.com/podcast and leave a 5-star review for a chance to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Before we jump into the games, if everyone could drop us a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe, pretty please. We are trying to grow this channel. We're trying to keep bringing these to you almost on a daily basis. And with the NBA All-Star break coming up here shortly, we might even be on more than once a day. So stay tuned for that. There will be a lot of NHL coming up while the NBA is down. Before we get into our games, I see we have a super chat from Clayton again. Clayton's always good to see you. Thank you for the super chat. He asks, on a shorter slate, at what ownership level do you fade the chalk, or do you eat it and differentiate elsewhere? I would presume it might depend on the slate, but I'll wait to hear your answer, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, on a slate like this, there is just so many expensive options. So I don't know if there's going to be someone that is going to be a line specifically that's going to be overly chalky, but That's something that's probably also slate dependent, but it's also up to you, right? So like if you're like saying like, oh, Ovechkin's gonna be my favorite play tonight, but then you look at the ownership and he's like 55%, you're like, well, I want to fade now. Just play your best plays is my best advice, and differentiate yourself elsewhere. Especially on a site like this, there's a lot of places you can go. So unless you're afraid like you're going to be slamming chalk with chalk in like 1 to 3 lineups, then maybe you got to make a tough decision on a fade here and there. But if your favorite play is someone who's going to be chalky, I say play him and differentiate yourself elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to approach things. Is that like I don't just blindly fade players. I will fade because of ownership. If we're on a slate where there's only one super expensive line, like let's say we're on a slate and it's only the Edmonton Oilers, and then besides that we have like Arizona and Anaheim, Los Angeles, whatever. And it seems like it's going to be like 50% Connor McDavid or something like that on a 5 or 6 game slate. Then yeah, at that point, then I probably will fade, because if he bricks, you can lap half the field and probably every one of your lineups will cash. But like you said, a night like tonight where there are so many different expensive spots you can go, like I would pay attention to our ownership. Like we're going to get to Vegas later, but one of the Vegas lines is very chalky. So like I wouldn't run out and slam in Colorado with that chalky Vegas line, right? Because like you said, that's just compounding chalk on top of chalk. And at that point, you're probably going to get duped, and you're probably just slamming in super chalky players across your lineup. So you're right. Don't worry about your main stack being chalky. If it is, that's fine. Worry about your secondary stack and your goalies and your defensemen being chalky as well. I don't like I said, if on a specific slate, maybe I might fade a 50% McDavid or something like that. But I won't go in a slate like tonight. I won't say, oh, I'm not playing Nathan McKinnon because he's 25%. Because there are lots of lines elsewhere that are going to come in at 3, 4, 5%, where you can differentiate. So I agree completely with you there, Josh. Thanks again for the question, Clayton. Always love seeing your questions. We'll try to answer questions if we can throughout the show, but obviously we have some games to talk about. So let's get to those games anyways. Let's talk about that very first game that's going to feature some expensive players that might come in at lower ownership. So we definitely need to review this. We have the Washington Capitals with a 2.8 implied goal total going into Boston with a 3.3 implied goal total. Washington has been shaking around their lines a bit. The latest iteration seems to have Evgeny Kuznetsov and Alex Ovechkin on the top line, with the second line of Backstrom, Vrana, and Wilson. Now, going into Boston, that would tell me that Bergeron, Pasternak, and Marchand are going to see a lot of the Kuznetsov-Ovechkin line, and I think that is a great, great matchup for the top line from Boston. Now, the second line from Washington, Vrana, Backstrom, Wilson, has typically been very good, both offensively and defensively. Two guys on the top power play unit together on that line as well. So there might be some stuff on both sides of the game, but for me personally, that Boston top line is something I'm interested in. What are you interested in, Josh?
Yeah, so the first thing I noticed this morning was that, Kuznetsov was a questionable this morning, right? So like the top line was Lars Eller with Ovechkin and Sheary, and they had pretty decent defensive numbers. Lars Eller is arguably their best defensive center. I guess you could throw Backstrom in that mix as well, but if you assumed Eller with Ovechkin going into Bergeron, yeah, it's still a good matchup for Boston, but it's not as good as Kuznetsov and Ovechkin. Like Kuznetsov and Ovechkin, for as good as they are offensively, are absolutely atrocious defensively. So like, and then you have Connor Sheary. Yeah, he's a nice player, but like he's not a defensive forward like Oshie, or even Vrana's decent defensively, Wilson, something like that. So this top line going against Bergeron, it's just going to be like, if things go the way they should, Bergeron line is just going to run them over. The problem is they're over 24,000 tonight. Yeah, there are a bunch of cheap lines you can fit them in with. Like there's a handful. So you have to kind of be like attentive of what you're doing if you're loading in a bunch of Boston one stacks, because there's only so many spots you can go. So you kind of have to play around with, your defenseman, with your secondary stack, stuff like that. But, this is probably in a vacuum my favorite spot of the night, and which is crazy considering there's Edmonton, there's Toronto with Matthews back, there's Vegas, there's Colorado, so this fully correlated top line going against Kuznetsov, Ovechkin is about as good as it gets. And then I do agree with you. I do like this Capital second line. If you had to go to the Caps, they're going to, for at least for a good part, they're going to see that second line at Boston, and David Krejci's back. And you don't know, he's older now and he's coming off an injury. I think he's back, right? Yeah. So
yeah, he's back.
Yeah. So I think if you want to get to the Caps here in MME, I think that second line, obviously if you want some Ovechkin one-offs for the power play one, that's obviously fine. But for me, it's Boston 1, Boston power play, and Washington 2.
Yeah, I think that'd be the one thing I'd mention about Washington too, is I probably wouldn't just stack Backstrom and Vrana. I think there are too few games where those two go off where Ovechkin and Karlsson don't, right? It would typically be, if Backstrom has a big game, it's because he has 2 assists going to Ovechkin and 1 to Karlsson or something like that. So if I do play Washington too, it would probably be Backstrom, Vrana, Ovechkin, or Backstrom, Vrana, Karlsson, or something like that. I would make sure to get in one of Ovechkin or Karlsson. You can leave Tom Wilson there if you want. He's not typically necessary, but I'm with you. I absolutely love everything about this Boston line tonight. I mean, we just updated our top stacks tool about 30 minutes before the show. We have them almost neck and neck with Colorado one for top stack percentage, 33% versus 31%. But we have Colorado one coming in at 25% ownership and Boston one at 11%. So less than half the ownership at virtually the same upside. Now they are more expensive, like you mentioned. So that is the difference. It's an extra $2,700 for the full stack. So you have to make that difference up somewhere. But the nice thing is that with Charlie McAvoy off the power play unit and Matt Grzelcyk on the power play unit, you can save, I think it's $1,800 dropping from McAvoy to Grzelcyk. And also Nick Ritchie's still on the top power play unit. So if you want to drop off Brad Marchand and throw on Nick Ritchie for your 3-man Boston stack, or drop off Pasternak even and throw on Nick Ritchie for the 3-man Boston stack, it's another way to get there. Now, obviously, you won't get that full Boston stack that way, and we usually talk about getting that full Boston stack when you can, and I would encourage people to do that. I'm just saying if there are certain lines that are a little bit more expensive elsewhere that you like, I don't hate the idea of leaving off a Marchand to throw on Nick Ritchie or something like that. Bring down the average cost per player. That will allow you to get to those other expensive guys. I'm probably not dropping down to any of the third lines. Any of the third lines interest you here? It seems like that third line for Washington would be pretty good, but broken power play and they might move guys around. Oshie might get up to the top line at some point. So
yeah, I mean,
no interest.
If you want to have a coiled Craig Smith, I mean, that's okay, but they're going to see, a good deal of Eller and Oshie. So dipping down to a third line matchup going against a good defensive center is not something I typically want to do on a shorter slate. Yep,
I hear you. All right. Defenseman here. I mean, we mentioned Matt Grzelcyk. He's PP1 for Boston. If you're using the Washington power play stack, I would try to get in John Karlsson where you can. Not sure what else you want, because I looked at the Washington time on ice for defensemen in their last game, and it was Karlsson at 27 or 28 minutes, and then everybody else was under 20. So it seems like it's just mixing and matching with John Karlsson as much as they can. So I don't know if there's anybody else. I mean, I guess Jacob Zboril, min price, 2,500 punt near 20 minutes might be fine, but I think that's it.
Yeah, I actually had a couple of people asking about Dmitry Orlov today. He's 2,500 power play too, and just if this was last season, yeah, I definitely do it. But his ice time's been down 15, 16, 17 minutes. His peripherals so far this season have been bad. If you absolutely need a min price someone on getting some power play time, I guess it's okay. But I'd avoid that if I could. I mean, if I had, and same with Justin Schultz, the defenseman in this game outside of Grzelcyk and Karlsson, I'm probably fading.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about the Washington PP2. And I should mention that they are giving that second power play a bit more time. What they're typically doing is just running Ovechkin for the 2 minutes and then swapping out the 4 guys. The top unit still sees, the lion's share, quote unquote, but that second power play unit is starting to see a bit more ice time. So it does bring those PP2 players a little bit more into play, guys like Eller. Or Schultz again, Schultz, I probably wouldn't play him unless I was stacking the Caps either. So I'm with you. For me, this game is about Grizzly or Carlson, depending on which side you stack. I do have some Vanacek. I don't mind some Vanacek. The Bruins have been shooting a lot lately. He's got a decent price, has played well this year, and will have no ownership. So I think I'm on Vanacek a bit. What about you?
Yeah, I don't mind that. He's in that price range where it's, he's going to get volume, and it's, be good if he gets the win. Tuukka Rask, 8,300. No thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you. Not against a team that relies a lot on power play scoring, especially, right?
Yeah.
You don't want those high percentage shots coming at your goaltender. All right, I think that's it for us in this game. We got to get to the next game, and this one is going to be an absolute doozy. We have the Toronto Maple Leafs with a 3.2 implied goal total, going into Edmonton with a 3.3 implied goal total. I think Toronto's implied goal total has come up a bit through the day, as Austin Matthews was confirmed in. So they are two of the higher totals on the night. Like I said, Austin Matthews back. He's going to the top line with Marner and Joe Thornton, which means that second line duo of Tavares and Nylander is back together. Edmonton changed up their lines as well. James Neal, top line, James Neal playing with Puljujärvi and Connor McDavid, and then the second line of Draisaitl, Yamamoto, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Now, before I ask you your thoughts on this, Josh, I want to just talk about Draisaitl for a minute. The line of Draisaitl, Yamamoto, Nugent-Hopkins actually played a lot together last year once Yamamoto got called up after Christmas, and they were great, like legitimately great. 2.9 expected goals for, 5.4 actual goals for, 56.4 expected goal share. That is just absolutely insane. And that's in 324 minutes of ice time. So we're talking about a third of a season. That's not a small sample by any stretch. But, and here's the but, without Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, those numbers cratered. So it seems like he might be the difference maker here. Like, I mean, cratered. 2.9 expected goals for down to 2.2, 5.4 expected goals down to 2.5. Like, the numbers all fell off. The one thing I will say is that it kind of seems that Leon Draisaitl is playing a little injured. And it's something that the Edmonton media has brought up as well. He's been missing a lot of practices. If you look at his time on ice, he's been under 20 minutes, 3 or 4 games out of his last 10, which is really unusual for him. He's usually 21, 22 minutes pretty consistently every night. There's even 1 or 2 games where he got down to 17 minutes. So, like, I don't like just blindly saying a player's playing injured, because that could greatly warp how you view that player. But between his falling production over the last month, missing practices, declining ice time, like he's lost a minute and a half of ice time over his last 10 games compared to his first 10. Like, there seems to be some red flags here. But like I said, he gets Ryan Nugent-Hopkins tonight, and that's a big boost to his line. So I think there's some thinking that needs to be done here, Josh. So why don't you do some thinking for us?
Yeah, so Edmonton's played Toronto like 3 games in a row now. Right? This is the 3rd one in a row. And now Freddie's going to be back, so it's going to be the 3rd different goalie they're facing. So we kind of have to make the McDavid decision, right? He's done absolutely nothing in these first 2 games, and he's been chalky. There's no reason to believe why he's not going to be chalky again, because he's Connor McDavid, but he hasn't had production. Now he doesn't get Nugent-Hopkins on his left. He has he's got big game Milan Lucic. James Neal. They're the same to me now. And they're going to go into the Matthews Thornton Marner line, which is the best defensive iteration of the Matthews line, right? As much as I hate on Joe Thornton, his defensive numbers this year have been incredible. So, as much as like this is a spot where I was hoping McDavid would come in, under-owned, and I would just jam it blindly, this is a spot where I want to fade this McDavid line. Just because, like, this Matthews being back, there's going to be ownership there as well. Like, so, like, I can't overstate how big of a drop-off going from Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is to James Neal.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. Like, yeah, the wowies with like Puljujärvi and McDavid are pretty telling, but like going from Nugent-Hopkins to James Neal is like sending Booch to play off with Mika Zibanejad, going to send him with like Brett Howden and like Gauthier. So it's a big deal. So for me, I'm gonna be definitely underweight on Edmonton one tonight. And if McDavid has one of his McDavid nights, so be it. Like all the numbers, everything is telling me to fade McDavid. Now, I will say in MME, if you want a power play stack, the Oilers, that's definitely on the table. But as a top line, I think I'm going to be underweight just because, one, I like this Matthews line going into McDavid. This is their best defensive iteration, right? So that's another reason to fade. And I want to get to this Edmonton second line. Yeah, maybe Draisaitl's a little banged up. Maybe he's just been bad because he's playing with, absolute third wheels instead of Nugent Hopkins. So I don't mind going to the second line. Kyler Yamamoto technically doesn't get power play time, but you know how they rotate Neal. They rotate in Puljujarvi. They've rotated in Yamamoto. They rotate in Chiasson. So I don't mind full stacking this line because he may end up getting a minute or two of power play time. They're going to avoid the Matthews matchup. They're going to get Tavares Nylander, who have been underwhelming this season. So I think for me, Edmonton 2, Toronto 1, underweight Edmonton 1, and then MME. I definitely have both sides of this power play stack.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned the McDavid fade because that's exactly what I'm doing tonight. I have 0% Connor McDavid in my lineups, and believe me, ladies and gentlemen, it's as scary as it sounds. We've seen him go nuclear a couple times already this year. There was one game where he entered a slate in the first period, I'm pretty sure. So, believe me, I understand that this could end up going very poorly, but I agree with all your points. Dropping off from Ryan Nugent-Hopkins to James Neal is just they're basically playing 4-on-5 with a dummy in front of the net. That's effectively what they're doing. And going in, and it's not like this is a good matchup, as you mentioned. This is a very bad matchup for that top line going into that Matthews line. I'm glad you mentioned the power play because, again, they changed up the power play last game. Tyson Barrie and Alex Chiasson were pushed off the top power play unit in their final power play of the game, and Darnell Nurse and Jesse Puljujarvi played it. Now, it wasn't Barrie or Chiasson being injured or anything like that. Barrie wasn't even on the ice before the power play, so he was plenty rested, and he played PP2, so did Chiasson. So, maybe they're going to Darnell Nurse PP1. We don't know that for sure, but I think it is a possibility. And Nurse played 29 minutes last game or something like that, and Barrie was under 20. So maybe Barrie's starting to fall out of favor a little. Maybe it's this Toronto series has shown a couple of his flaws. So yeah, I'm mostly out on Edmonton. I do have one Edmonton 2 stack here tonight because I was able to fit them in with a line that I like later on this slate. So I do have one share of full Edmonton 2, but that's it. Don't have a lot of Edmonton. Do have a lot of Toronto. I have a lot of the Matthews line basically because I think with Nugent Hopkins gone and Neal there, it's just a much better matchup for Edmonton or for Toronto 1 now. So Matthews, Marner, throw in Thornton if you want, Morgan Riley, no problem. I'm in on all of those guys tonight. Looking at the defense, I just mentioned Darnell Nurse played 29 minutes last game, and Barrie was under 20. Adam Larsson was the only Edmonton defenseman over 20 minutes in their previous game. Toronto defensemen have generally been disappointing this year. Morgan Riley's had a couple big games. Jake Muzzin's been relatively solid. Other than that, they really haven't done a whole lot. So for me, I'm putting the power play defensemen with the power play guys, but they're really under a lot of defensemen I like out of this game.
Yeah, I agree. Morgan Riley is someone I just play if I'm stacking Toronto 1 or the power play. I would never one off him. Muzzin, if I have if I come down to my last spot and I have the salary, is someone I'd consider. But I agree on the Edmonton side, Nurse, 5,900. If he's cheaper than Barrie. So if he does get the power play time, even in a bottle, I'd rather play Nurse than Barrie anyway. He's just better.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, and then I feel like Ethan Bear is going to be a popular punt tonight just because he's 2,500. He may see some power play 2 time, but his time on ice concerns me. But if he is up there with Nurse, he may approach 20 minutes.
Yeah, he could. And it seems like I've been waiting for that, and they're not quite giving him those minutes. It seems like Edmonton's almost doing with Nurse what Washington does with Carlson, right? Carlson will play 25 to 30 minutes, and then everybody else will play under 20. It kind of seems like Edmonton's trending in that direction, at least in the short term. Goalies, oh boy. Anderson back, but he is $8,000 on the road going into Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Mike Smith is at home at 7,900 on DraftKings. Are either of those appealing to you?
So in a vacuum, no. but like in GPPs, if you want to correlate your goalie with your stacks, I think that's fine. I wouldn't go all in on either of these goalies, but if you're 150 maxing and you have a good bit of Toronto, I think it would make sense to have some Freddie. And if you have a good bit of Edmonton, it makes sense to have some Mike Smith. But in 1 to 3, I'm fading these goalies.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have a couple in correlated lineups, and that's about it. I think that's it for me from this game. Anything else from you?
Hopefully it stays quiet on the Edmonton side.
Yeah, fingers crossed, buddy. Just want to remind everybody that we do have free stuff going on, given away pretty much every day here at Awesemo.com. We usually have projections or rankings or a whole bunch of different types of goodies for everybody that's out there that wants to take a look at what we have going on. And today we have NHL ownership projections up for free on the site. We have PGA ownership projections for the upcoming tournament also on the site, and we have NBA player projections as well. So head on over to Awesemo.com. We have NHL and PGA player projections for free today, as well as NBA player projections. Okay, we're not talking about NBA here. We're going to get back to the NHL, and we're going to get to a game that doesn't really seem appealing, but I think we'll have a lot of ownership because of the prices from some of the players. So let's talk about it. St. Louis, the Blues have a 2.9 implied goal total going into Anaheim, with a 2.6 implied goal total. We're still playing the waiting game with Vladimir Tarasenko. It doesn't appear as though he'll be going tonight again. Looks like it'll be closer to this weekend. So doesn't look like there are going to be too many lineup changes for either side here. Anaheim mixed up their lines last game. Anaheim mixed up their lines last game, and we're not going to know what the lines are because we don't have Anaheim beat writers. There's literally, I think, one person that covers Anaheim, and he never gives lines because he doesn't watch the practices. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just the way it is. So last game, Anaheim changed up their lines in the third period and decided to go with a line of Henrique, Silfverberg, and Sonny Milano, and then Lundstrom with Raquel and Zegras, and then Ryan Getzlaf, Max Jones, and Max Comtois. Comtois, Jones, and Getzlaf does not interest me in the slightest. Henrique, Silfverberg, Zegras does. It feels like that's one of those lines that may get into some lineups today, into those Boston 1 lineups, into those Colorado lineups. Is there any cheap lines? Do you like the Anaheim side at all here? What do you see, Josh?
We're at this crossroads again. It's like, well, we got to talk about the Ducks, and they're all the same price. Like you mentioned the last game. So like, even if we don't know the lines, like they're all around the same price with their most expensive skater is Rickard Rakell at 4,000. So if there's a line that you like, you put them in, and then if you happen to get lines before lock and they change, you should have the wiggle room. There's a couple of things in this game that I want to mention. First, Isaac Lundstrom, right? He's coming off a hat trick at like 0.6%. He is 2,700 tonight. So I would imagine he's going to garner some ownership in these more expensive stacks. Now, I will say I did look him up. He's a former first-round pick, and he is projected to be a pretty good top 6 player. Not that he's there yet, but with these lines, like it might be a popular landing spot for the people building with Boston 1 for like the Edmontons, for the Torontos, for the Colorado. So just keep that in mind. Like Lundstrom doesn't see power play time, so I'd find the extra 300 to go to Henrique tonight and get him in with Silfverberg. I think that's going to be a lower owned duo. I think just because I wouldn't say like recency bias, but if you game log these players like Lundstrom, Raquel, Comtois, when they were together, they saw an uptick in minutes on the ice. So if you're looking for the Ducks, like the players that you want to play from the Ducks, you want to get the people who are getting the ice time because they're all around the same price. So you want them to be on the ice more. And Raquel has been getting the most minutes. So But I don't mind going to Henrik Silfverberg here just because they're 6,600 for the duo. They get full power play correlation. You want to put him in with Shattenkirk, who's also 3,200. So you're spending under 10,000 for the trio. I don't mind doing that. It may be popular, but I don't think it's going to be as popular as putting in, Zegras and Raquel. So for me, that's where I'm at with the Ducks. And then the St. Louis side, I actually kind of like this top line, O'Reilly, Kyrou, and Sanford. I'm not huge on Sanford, but he's super cheap at 3,200. Riley and Kyrou, this line in a very small sample size has been very high event, 25 minutes, but they have been, 18 high danger chances, 4 per 60, 53% Corsi for, and a 4.2 expected goals for. Yeah, that's probably not sustainable. If it is, they're going to be one of the elite lines in the NHL. But in a small sample, going against a team that's just bad defensively, going against this Getzlaf, Comtois, Max Jones pairing or line, if it is that, I think this is a decent spot to get a line at lower ownership in a good matchup, right? O'Reilly's power play 1, Sanford and Kyrou are power play 2. So if you're putting in like Edmonton or Toronto or Colorado, it's tough with Boston. You're kind of looking at cheaper guys with power play correlation. So this line's kind of broken on the power play, but I think as a full line, you're going to get them pretty low owned because of that. And I like this spot.
Yeah. And if you're playing St. Louis tonight, it's probably not for the power play anyway, right? Because Anaheim's one of the least penalized teams in the NHL. So like broken power play correlation here isn't as big a factor as it might be in some other matchups. And like you said, there are only so many spots where you can go where if you use a McKinnon and Rantanen and Landeskog, where you can actually get good players at a reasonable price. So yeah, I don't mind the O'Reilly, Sanford, Kyrou call at all, just mixing a couple of those guys and going with it. You brought up the ownership, and the ownership is a good point. I'm not exactly sure what to make of it, but we do have Henrik and Silfverberg quite a bit higher owned than Raquel and Zegras. Like double the ownership. So
maybe name value.
Yeah, I think that might be what it is Henrik Silfverberg are definitely going to be better known than Zegras and Lundstrom. Like for me, I'm saying I'm going to go Zegras and Raquel for this reason is they probably get a lot of third and fourth line matchups from St. Louis. And with all of St. Louis's injuries, like they're still missing Tarasenko, they're still missing Schwartz and Bozak and Thomas and Parayko and all those guys. Like this is a pretty depleted lineup. So they can put together a reasonable top 6 because they have enough good players, but they can't put together a reasonable bottom 6. And even the defensemen are starting to hurt. Like Marco Scandella, he should not be playing 23 or 24 minutes a game like he is. That kind of goes to show just how much depth they're missing right now. So I just like Zegras and Raquel better because I think it's a better matchup. If they happen to come in at lower ownership, I'll just take that as a bonus. I think it'll be close between Zegras, Raquel, and Silfverberg, Henrik anyway, as far as ownership goes. Dumping down to defenseman, I don't think I have a single Anaheim defenseman roster. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I have some Ben Hutton for 2,500. I don't know why my optimizer gave me a lot of Ben Hutton today, but I have a lot of Ben Hutton for some reason. So I'm going with Ben Hutton in some Anaheim lineups just to get cheaper. I have some one-off Justin Falk because I think he'll be super low owned for like 23 or 24 minutes at a reasonable price. But that's about it for me from defenseman. This isn't a game I'm targeting for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like Shattenkirk at 3,200, but he's on the top power play. So like, I don't mind getting the 3-man power play correlation, even though, the Ducks don't have a very vaunted power play. But I will say one thing that we've been discussing quietly recently is the play of Jordan Bennington, right? He has not been playing well at all. So I don't know. With all these injuries and Bennington in question, like as much as I want to hate the Ducks, like I keep landing back here just because of the injuries, the goalies, the price. It's just something that we have to, as tough it is to click him in, I think this is a good spot for him.
Like there aren't going to be many games where you want to play Anaheim against St. Louis this year, right? Like this is probably going to be the last time where you're actually going to want to do it because Tarasenko will be back very, very shortly. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm not going crazy on Anaheim, but I do think I have a stack in 3 out of 20 lineups. So maybe I'll get double the field or something like that Nothing too crazy. I assume we're back on the John Gibson train.
Always. I mean, he's been pretty bad recently, but 7,000 at home, it's kind of hard to ignore.
Yep, I'm right back with you. If he tanks us again, he tanks us again. But boy, we are going down with the ship, the John Gibson ship. All right, let's move it along. We're going to Vegas, actually, because Vegas has the biggest total on the slate, 4.1 at home to the Minnesota Wild. The Wild are carrying a 2.5 implied goal total. The big news, I guess, from the Minnesota side is that Zach Parise looks like he's going to be a healthy scratch tonight. Didn't skate in warm-up skate. They called up Gerald Mayhew and Kyle Rao, 2 forwards. So it looks like aside from Ryan Hartman being out from the third line, Zach Parise will also be out. So we're anticipating the top 6 for Minnesota to stay together. But the bottom 6 is going to be a big jumble. That probably helps the Vegas third line a little bit because now there's no depth left in Minnesota. It's just Marcus Foligno and a couple plugs. Vegas, going back to their old line, top line, Stone, Stevenson, Pacioretty, second line, Carlson, Smith, and who's the other? Oh, Marchessault, yeah. So they're going back to their normal top 6. Minnesota has their regular top 6. What do you like out of this game, Josh?
Where's Jake? I know you're in the chat. Choo choo, Vegas won, baby. Chandler Stevenson on the top power play. They're going to be chalky as all whatever 4-letter word you want to put in there. They're going to be chalky. This is just wild. So, Jake says the Vegas total is 3.1.
Yeah, 3.1. That was my mistake. I misspoke there.
Yeah, I mean, the Vegas top line is still going to be wildly chalky just because Max Pacioretty has been in the low 8s. He's down to 7,000. Mark Stone was up around 7,000. He's now 5,700. Chandler Stevenson is around where he always is, but the big news is he's on power play 1. So yeah, I love Vegas one tonight. I always love them when they're together. Now even more with Stevenson on the power play. It's not the best matchup 5-on-5, but this game got out of control last time. Now these lines are more correlated. So yeah, I really love this Vegas one. I even like this Vegas 2. I know they're not on power play 1, but they are on power play 2. It's not like the Knights are one of those teams who don't really give way more minutes to power play 1 than power play 2. Obviously, the power play 2 is going to play way less, but like they're still fully correlated. They're super cheap. You can get them in with the more expensive stacks. It might be tough with Boston unless you punt goalie and defenseman, but going into that Rask, Zuccarello, Kaprizov line, that's something I want to exploit. For as good as everyone has been saying they are offensively, they are not very good defensively. And a bunch of people were messaging me saying, I hate Zuccarello. I don't. I really like Zuccarello. He's one of my favorite players, especially when he's on the Rangers, but I do not want to play a 5,500 Matt Zuccarello. And then this Minnesota depth is just not great. I mean, I don't really want to get to the third line of Vegas with like Cody Glass, Alex Tuck, and my boy Keegan Coleslaw, but like I don't mind a Glass Tuck duo if you really need some salary relief. Glass gets the power play 1. So for me, Vegas 1, Vegas power play. If you want to get weird and put in Glass instead of Stevenson, if you're not on the Stevenson train like I am, you can do that. But Vegas 1, Vegas power play, some Vegas 2. And on the Minnesota side, I'm probably going to be underweight. I don't mind this top line. I just don't like going against Pacioretty and Stone. Like that's just one of those. Like Stone is one of the best defensive forwards in the league, so that's not something I like doing. And I'm not a huge believer in the second line of Victor Rask. I love Kirill Kaprizov, but if you want to have some minis on the power play, that's fine. But I'm going to be underweight on the Wild.
Yeah, I'm not super big on Minnesota tonight here either. I do like the price of their defensemen, and we'll get to those in a minute, but I'm just not big on the team here for tonight. Vegas, you're right. Their ownership, I think, is something we're talking about. We have the Pacioretty Stevenson Stone line coming in between 9 and 10%, right on their top stacks tool, so they're fine to use, it seems. Vegas 2, we had them at quite a bit of ownership, more ownership than the Stevenson line, actually, coming in at 11.6%, more than double their top stack percentage. It's just because they're so cheap, right? Yeah, they're a little over 11K. You can easily fit them in with Colorado 1. You can easily fit them in with Toronto 1, Edmonton 1. You can even put them in with Boston 1, and you don't even need to super punt your defenseman to do it. So I think that Vegas second line is going to be super popular. So I'm kind of with you that if I'm going to go to Vegas, it's probably like, I'm not going to, again, I will not begrudge anybody for throwing them in with your more expensive stacks. It's something I'm going to do as well, because I think there are places where I can get a little bit different, like defenseman or one-offing some guys. So I'm not super concerned about that. But just be aware that there's going to be a lot of ownership on Vegas 2 tonight. So like if you're playing 5 lineups and you're just mixing in Vegas 2 with all the expensive stacks, you're probably going to get duplicated a fair bit. So just be aware of that little problem. Defenseman, I do like the defenseman in this game. It's like I said, I love those cheap Minnesota defensemen. Listen, I get it. It's a tough matchup. But Jared Spurgeon, 3,600. I was saying the other day on a show, he's a guy that typically scores double-digit goals every year. Just a bit of snake bitten right now, so I love his price at 3,600. Ryan Suter running the top power play for 3,500. I probably wouldn't want off him, but I don't hate it either at 3,500. He doesn't need a lot to really exceed value. Vegas, those super expensive guys as always, but you do have some cheap guys you can dump down to as well. There are a lot of guys to like here. What do you like?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a discount on Theodore and Pietrangelo too. I mean, Theodore's only 5,700. He was up in the 7,000s earlier this year. So if you're looking to get away from the chalky Edmonton, the chalky Toronto, stuff like that, going 4-man Vegas might be a way to do that. Yeah, you can't get in another expensive line with them, but you're gonna have probably more than likely a unique lineup with low ownership. So I don't mind Theodore. He's one of my favorite defensemen, especially after the Ducks just gave him up to protect Clayton Stoner. That's a story for another time. Yeah. But, Alec Martinez I like too, 4,900. He's a decent one-off, but I'd probably find the 800 more for Theodore or the 900 more for Pietrangelo.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love the expensive Vegas defenseman here tonight, and I do like Jared Spurgeon on the other side. Don't mind the price on Cam Talbot, 7,100. I think it'll be a good leverage spot, especially if Vegas 2 is as high owned as they are. Like a quarter of lineups might have Vegas 1 or 2 or 3 in their lineup. So don't mind Talbot for 7,100. What do you think?
I agree. I'm kind of off Fleury. He's just been playing way too much.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Before we move on, I just want to let everybody know that if you want to get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there, you can do so with an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. This includes full access to all the premium content on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, rankings, and a whole lot more. If you want to play just NHL DFS, then you can sign up for our Awesemo Plus NHL weekly package. That is only $11.95. You can stop guessing and start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Okay. This game coming up, I have a lot of interest on one line in particular. I think we're probably going to be on the same line, but I want to hear your thoughts. We have Arizona with a 2.8 implied goal total going into Los Angeles. The Kings have a 2.6 implied goal total. It looks like Connor Garland is going to be back for Arizona tonight, but as always, we have no idea what their lineups are going to be until warmups start. All right, Josh, I like one line here because I think there's only one line to like, considering we don't know what Arizona is going to look like. What do you see?
Yeah, and as much as I talk about hating to roster Anaheim Ducks, I hate rostering this line, but this is a very good spot for the LA top line. Like Kopitar, I'm a big Kopitar guy, and he's 5,700. Where it gets a little tougher to swallow is clicking in 5,200 Dustin Brown and 4,400 Alex Iafallo, but they're fully correlated power play 1. They're gonna see let's just assume these lines stay together. They're gonna see Keller, Schmaltz, and Derek Brassard. There's nothing there that scares me. Arizona PK is not that great. Kopitar is he's always involved in the power play, obviously. And then, you look at you look at Drew Doughty's price at 4,800, like it's just super enticing. Like, so for me, like this is a Kings top line. I know like last week we touted Jeff Carter 3 times and it's just miserable. Like,
hey, it worked twice, man.
Yeah, it did. Once on the empty net. We can't pull that card at least until like April. But like I like this Kings top line tonight. Yeah. And then like I don't mind going to the second line of Anthony Cia, Vardy, and Carter just because they're fully quartered and power play too. But the thing is with like when Kempe was there instead of Anthony Cia, they were way better defensively. Now with Anthony Cia there, it's going to be a bit rough with puck possession. So I don't mind, like, say, like Garland's with Dvorak and Uncle Phil. Like, I don't mind going to Arizona too if they're going to see that Velarde line. So for me, it's really only about Kings 1 in my small amount of lineups. But in MME, I'd be, Kings 1. I'd dabble a little bit. I'd sprinkle some Kings too. And if Garland and Dvorak are together, that's a pair I get to some exposure to in MME. And then Drew Doughty's too cheap. So if you're using Kings, definitely Doughty, and even as a one-off, Doughty.
Yeah, the LA Kings top line is the one I wanted to talk about, and it's for this particular reason. It is a good matchup at 5-on-5. You're right. There's not a line with line matching that we have to be concerned about by any stretch of the imagination. This is the particular reason why I like this line here tonight. The Arizona penalty kill over on Hockey Viz. It's a great website. It's a subscription only, but if you're really into hockey, I would recommend people going to check out hockeyviz.com. A lot of great visuals just to, you can see what's happening on the ice as opposed to just reading words or numbers. The Arizona penalty kill by Hockey Viz's expected goals model is 32% worse than the league average. 32%. The only reason why this team isn't getting shelled on the penalty kill is their team penalty kill at 4-on-5 is 917, which I shouldn't have to tell anybody. A 917 on the penalty kill is just way, way, way higher than can be sustained. I think the leader in the NHL last year was 905, and there was only 2 teams anywhere near around 900. So that Arizona penalty kill has been floated by outstanding goaltending, and they do have outstanding goaltenders, but they can't do the job every single night. So LA with that perfect correlation and reasonable price, plus Drew Doughty, like him a lot here tonight. It doesn't really matter what the matchup is. For the Arizona side, like I had some interest in like going to like a Schmaltz Kessel like 2-man, because I do think like if you can get down into the second and third lines of the Kings, that Arizona can do some damage here. But we just don't know what the lines are going to be. Like we have lines what we think they're going to be. You talked about Schmaltz, Keller, and Brassard, but it's just an educated guess. Like we don't know exactly what the matchups are going to be. So like I put in Schmaltz and Kessel. I'm probably going to take him out and put in Schmaltz and Keller, because then if I could swap down to a Dvorak, or I can swap down to a Kessel after that if the lines are different somehow. I just want to get some Arizona here, and whatever their second line is going to be at warmups, that's what I'm going to late swap to. I am putting in a couple Arizona 2-mans to try to take advantage of this bad LA Kings depth, but I'm with you. I think this game in general is all about Kings 1. Oliver Ekman-Larsson played 15 minutes last game. He is completely off the board in the fantasy realm. Ilya Lyubushkin, 16 minutes, almost hit the shot block bonus, 2 blocks, 4 games in a row. Buddy, he's going to get there. I'm calling it Lyubushkin shot block bonus tonight. Any defenseman you like in this game?
Outside of Doughty, and if you want to get Arizona power play Jacob Chikrin, I guess it's fine, but like he's overpriced. I'd rather pay $5,700 for Theodore, $4,800 for Doughty. The list goes on and on. He's probably just a Arizona correlation play. I'm on board with Lyubushkin for min price. I always love the shot blockers at min price. And then on the Kings side, if Ole Mata is going to see the minutes with Doughty, he's a decent punt. And Sean Walker, if you're playing some Kings depth in MME, I guess is okay.
Yeah, I'm with you. There are some cheap guys to use here. Sean Walker, like him. I'm going right back to the Bushkin. All right. Before we get to our final game, just want to let everybody know that if you want to stay up to date on the latest NHL DFS news, you can do so with our Awesemo NHL Twitter handle. It's different than it was last season. So if you're following us last year, you might have to follow a different one now. It's Awesemo NHL. You can stay up to date with lineups and projections. Everything is shared there through our Twitter. So head on over to Awesemo NHL Twitter handle, or better yet, you can just subscribe and join our Slack chat. All right, we got a few minutes left here for our final game. Colorado, San Jose. Colorado 3.5 implied goal total. San Jose 2.5 implied goal total. We have Colorado as the highest owned line of the night, near 25%. So it seems they're going to be chalky, but Sam Girard still PP1 because there's no Byram or Makar for the Avs. I will say right out, I have a fair amount of Colorado 1, but I absolutely love the Colorado 3 line tonight. Comfort, Donskoy, Burakovsky. They're going to be going against the depth from the Sharks, and they absolutely throttled them in the last game. Super cheap, so you can fit any 2 or 3 of them in with your Bostons or your Edmontons or your Torontos. So while I do have a fair share of Colorado 1, I love Colorado 3 as a filler stack. What do you like in this game, Josh?
You don't have to convince me to play my boy Jonas Donskoy. So, yeah. I mean, listen, they're fully correlated power play too. They are super cheap, like really cheap. They're under 10,000. I like them better than the Ducks. I like them better than Vegas too, just probably from an ownership perspective. But again, like Colorado 1, they kind of got beat up pretty good by the Sharks top line, but again, not really going to play them for the 5-on-5. It's all about the power play. Sharks PK is not great. They're defensively, they're pretty poor. So yeah, they're going to be chalky, but obviously the way to do that is fully power play stack them, right? I did it the last slate. You put in Kadri, you put in Girard, you get all 5. You get the 5 at a lower total ownership. If you want to, swap out Landeskog for Kadri, you can mix and match on the power play. That's fine. But I like this third line. It's my favorite filler line of the night. I do like the Sharks top line. It's an MME play only for me, though. I don't think I'm going to get there in 1 to 3. The Sharks depth is pretty rough, but again, Balser is a 2,900 power play 1. I think if you need another cheap one off, I think that guy is where you can go. If you have space for Timo Meier, I think I don't mind the second line. Just Dylan Gambrell just doesn't do much for me. So I don't mind a Meier Balsers 2-man, or like a Balsers Donato 2-man for some power play 1. But for me, it's Colorado power play, Colorado 3, Sharks top line, and always Burns. I wouldn't force him in, but if you have the space, I don't mind him.
Yeah, it's not quite always Burns anymore. I wish it was, but it's not. I'm with you on that Meier Balsers 2-man. I really like that 2-man. Their numbers in a small sample, especially with Gambrell, have been good this year. I worry about that Colorado second line because Valeri Nichushkin jumping on that second line makes them a lot better defensively. But we've seen Colorado's lines change up pretty much on a daily basis. So I'm not too concerned that Nichushkin and Saad are going to be Kadri's wingers the entire game. But yeah, I absolutely love that Colorado third line as a filler stack here tonight. Colorado top line power play stack. I do like them as well. The San Jose top line has been good this year, like genuinely good. So if people want to use them, like you said, not going to begrudge them whatsoever. I'm pretty much out on both goalies in this game because I do not play Martin Jones unless it's correlated, and I don't have a lot of Sharks, and I'm certainly not playing 8,400 Grubauer on the road. What about you?
I don't even play Martin Jones in my Sharks lineup, so okay. I'm out. I don't like spending over 8,000 for goalies. It's not something I do, especially with these shot bonuses now. I'd rather get the cheap guys who are going to see volume.
All right. I like that. All right. We're going to wrap it up here. Before we head out, Josh, why don't you give the listeners your favorite stack of the day?
Vegas 1.
Vegas 1. All right. I'm going to say besides Boston won, which is obvious, I'm going to say Los Angeles won. That is my favorite stack of the day. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please like and subscribe. Slam that notification bell if you want to see whenever we get on the air. Thank you to our producer, Tyler. Thank you to our Grandmaster, Josh Harris, for joining me today. Good luck out there, everybody.